My family abandoned me at 6 for my sick sister. Now that she died, they came back begging. But I destroyed them at church, and they'll never forget what I said. I'm 26 years old. I work in digital marketing, and there's something I need to get off my chest because basically I've been carrying this my whole life. The thing is, my biological parents abandoned me when I was 6 years old. And it wasn't because they were on drugs or were terrible people or anything like that. No. It was because they decided my sick sister was more important than me and literally left me with my grandparents like I was a dog. They didn't want any more. And the worst part, I mean, what really fucks me up to this day is that they never had the balls to tell me the truth directly. They just one day took me to my grandparents' house and told me it was temporary while they took care of Zoe, my sister, who was sick. Temporary. That was the word they used, and I believed them because I was 6 years old and I trusted them completely. I should start at the beginning, I guess. I was a normal kid, went to school, played with my neighborhood friends, watched cartoons on Saturday mornings. My parents, Jeremy and Stephanie, were like any couple of parents. Nothing special, but not bad either. My sister Zoe was 2 years younger than me and had always been sick, basically since she was born. I don't remember exactly what she had, something with her immune system or her organs. Honestly, they never explained the details well because I was too young. But I do remember she spent a lot of time in hospitals, and that my parents were always stressed about it. There were medicines all over the house, doctors who came frequently, that kind of thing. I understood that Zoe needed special attention. Even a 6-year-old kid could grasp that. But I never thought it meant I was surplus in the equation. The day everything changed was a Thursday. I remember it perfectly because it was pizza day at school and I was super excited. My dad picked me up after school, which was weird because usually my mom did it, and he told me we were going to spend a few days at my grandparents' house. He packed a backpack with my clothes, my favorite toys, my dinosaur-shaped pillow that I loved, and took me to Mabel and Stanley's house. My paternal grandparents. They told me that Zoe was really bad, that she needed surgery or special treatment. I don't remember exactly. And that they had to focus on that for a while. Temporary. They repeated it like 5 times. It's just temporary, Connor. We'll be back soon. I believed them, obviously. They were my parents. Why wouldn't I believe them? The first few days at my grandparents' house were like a vacation, honestly. My grandmother Mabel cooked amazing food. She made pancakes every morning with chocolate chips. And my grandfather Stanley took me fishing at the lake that was like 20 minutes from their house. They were good people, very loving with me, but I missed my house, my room, my school. Every night before sleeping, I would ask my grandmother when my parents were coming back, and she always told me the same thing. Soon, honey, soon. 1 week turned into 2, 2 into a month, and I kept asking, and they kept saying soon. It was my Uncle Vincent, my dad's younger brother, who finally told me the truth. He was like 32 years old at the time and was married to Vanessa, a super nice woman who always smelled like vanilla. Vincent came often to visit me at my grandparents' house, played with me, helped me with homework, and one day, like 2 months after they left me there, we sat on the porch, and he said, "Connor, I need to talk to you about something important." I was 6 years old, but I wasn't stupid. I knew something bad was coming. He told me that my parents weren't coming back for me, that they had decided to stay with Zoe full-time because she needed 24-hour care, and that I was going to stay with my grandparents. You know what it feels like to be told something like that when you're 6 years old? It's like the floor disappears under your feet. It was my fault, and Vincent hugged me and told me no, that it wasn't anything I had done, that my parents simply couldn't take care of both of us. They couldn't take care of both of us. That phrase haunted me for years. Literally years. Because what it really meant was that they had chosen Zoe over me, that I wasn't important enough for them to make the effort to keep me in their lives. And look, I understand that Zoe was sick. I'm not a monster, but there were other options, right? They could have hired help. They could have asked more family to collaborate. They could have done something that wasn't simply getting rid of me like I didn't matter. But no, they made the easiest decision for them, which was to eliminate one variable from the equation, and that variable was me. My grandparents did the best they could, really, but they were already old. Mabel was like 68 years old and Stanley 71. And taking care of a 6-year-old kid full-time was exhausting for them. After about 6 months, Vincent and Vanessa offered to have me come live with them. They had a bigger house, with a huge yard where I could play, and Vanessa didn't work then, so she could be with me all day. My grandparents agreed, my biological parents too, because of course, what did they care where I was, as long as I wasn't their problem? And that's how at 7 years old, I moved in with my uncle and aunt. And honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to me after all that shit. Vincent and Vanessa treated me like I was their own son from day one. They enrolled me in a new school, decorated a whole room for me with superhero posters that I chose, took me to the park on weekends, went to all my school presentations. Vanessa taught me to cook, simple things like scrambled eggs and sandwiches, and Vincent took me with him when he went to the gym and let me play on the machines that weren't dangerous. It was weird at first, adapting to a new house, new rules, but they were so patient with me, so loving, that I started to feel safe again. Like maybe not everything was lost. When I was like 8 years old, almost 9, I started calling them mom and dad without even thinking about it. The first time I did it was when Vanessa picked me up from school and I ran toward her yelling, "Mom, Mom, I got a 10 on my math test." She froze for a second. I think her eyes filled with tears, and then she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. That night, Vincent asked me if I felt comfortable calling them that, and I told him, yes. That to me, they were my real parents, because Jeremy and Stephanie never came back, never called, never asked how I was. And it was true. Almost 3 years had passed since they left me with my grandparents, and they had only come to see me like 3 times, and each visit was super awkward, like I was a distant cousin they barely knew. The visits from my biological parents were the worst, really. They would show up without warning, sometimes with Zoe in her wheelchair or with all her medical equipment, and they acted like nothing had happened, like they hadn't completely abandoned me. They asked me generic things like, "How's school?" or "Do you have friends?" but never anything real, never anything deep. They didn't ask what scared me, what I dreamed of being when I grew up, what my favorite food was now. And I, being the kid I was, tried to impress them, tried to make them realize what they were missing. I told them about my grades, about the soccer team I had joined, about the science project I won. But they just nodded distractedly and then left again. And I was left there feeling like an idiot for trying to earn their attention. By the time I was 11, I had understood the game completely. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to wake up one day and realize they missed me or that they had made a mistake. I was an uncomfortable obligation. They fulfilled like twice a year, nothing more. So I decided to stop trying. The last time I tried to contact them was on my 11th birthday. I sent them a handmade invitation for my party, with drawings and everything. I really put effort into that thing. They didn't respond. Not even to say they couldn't come. They simply ignored me. And that's when something in me broke definitively. I mean, not in a dramatic way. I didn't cry or anything. It was just like a cold and calculated decision. I thought, well, that's it. It's over. I'm not going to keep begging for crumbs of affection from people who don't want me. Vincent and Vanessa never spoke badly of Jeremy and Stephanie in front of me, which I really appreciate now that I'm older. They could have filled my head with poison. They could have said horrible things about them, and it would have been totally justified, but they never did. They were just there for me. Consistently. Every day. When I was 14, one day after school, Vanessa sat with me in the kitchen while I did homework and told me something I'll never forget. She told me, "Connor, there's something we want you to know. Vincent and I can't have biological children. We tried for years before you came into our lives, and when you arrived, it was like the universe finally gave us the gift we always wanted." She told me they loved me like she had given birth to me herself, and that if I agreed, they wanted to officially adopt me when I turned 18. I can't explain what I felt in that moment. It was a mix of pure happiness and also sadness, because finally someone was telling me they wanted me, that they actively chose me. But at the same time, it was a reminder that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally simply didn't. I said yes immediately. That, of course, I wanted them to adopt me, and that conversation basically solidified everything. They were my real parents. Not Jeremy and Stephanie, It didn't matter what a birth certificate said. The next few years were good, the best of my life up to that point. Honestly, I graduated from high school with honors, got into a good university with a partial scholarship, and Vincent and Vanessa covered the rest without even thinking twice. My biological mom didn't go to my high school graduation. My biological dad didn't either. But Vincent and Vanessa were in the front row, yelling my name when I received my diploma. And that's all that mattered. The day I turned 18 was incredible, not just because of the party my parents threw me, but because officially, legally, I became Connor, son of Vincent and Vanessa. We went to court, I signed papers, and the judge asked me if I was sure about this decision. If I understood that this would change my last name and all my legal documentation. I told him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. Jeremy and Stephanie had to sign papers too, officially renouncing their parental rights, and they did it without any problem, without any objection, which hurt, but also didn't surprise me. To them, I had stopped, existing a long time ago. I started college studying business administration, although I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I wanted to be independent and successful to prove to the world, and maybe to Jeremy and Stephanie, although I would never have admitted it out loud, that they didn't need me to be someone. My parents visited me every 2 weeks on campus, brought me homemade food and clean clothes, things I probably could have done myself, but they insisted on doing because that's how they showed their love. I went to their house every vacation, every long weekend, and honestly, my life was pretty normal and happy. I talked to my grandmother Mabel on the phone every week. She was still an important presence in my life, and sometimes she mentioned things about Jeremy and Stephanie in passing, like that Zoe had had another surgery, or that they had sold their house and moved to a smaller apartment near the hospital. I listened, but didn't ask for details. I wasn't really interested. When I was 20 years old, halfway through my second year of college, I got a call from my grandmother on a Tuesday night. She was crying, which immediately scared me because my grandmother never cried. She was a super strong woman. She told me, "Connor, I have to tell you something. Zoe passed away this morning. Her body finally couldn't take it anymore." And I sat there in my dorm room, not knowing what to feel. On one hand, Zoe was my sister. We had shared parents, although we never really grew up together, and her death was objectively sad. On the other hand, I barely knew her. I had spent maybe a total of 50 hours with her in my entire life, and most of that time she was too sick to really interact. But what bothered me most, what really fucked me up, was thinking that she had received 14 years of complete love and attention from our parents, while I had received 6 mediocre years, and then nothing. I went to the funeral because I felt I should, not for Jeremy and Stephanie, but for my grandmother, who was devastated. My parents Vincent and Vanessa came with me, which was weird because it meant they were going to see Jeremy for the first time in years, and the tension between them was palpable. The funeral was in a small church. There were like 50 people, mostly family members I barely recognized or didn't know at all. I saw Jeremy and Stephanie sitting in the front row. She was a mess, crying uncontrollably, and he looked like he had aged 20 years, completely destroyed. Part of me felt sorry for them, because losing a child must be the worst thing in the world. But another part of me, the part that was still angry about everything they did to me, thought, well, now you know what it feels like to lose something important. I stayed away during the whole ceremony. I didn't talk to them. I didn't approach to offer condolences. I basically acted like they were strangers, because that's what they were to me at that point. After the burial, there was a reception at my grandmother's house, and there it was inevitable to run into them. Stephanie saw me and came toward me with open arms, like she was going to hug me, and I literally took a step back. I said, "Hi, Stephanie," with the most neutral voice possible, and she stopped, confused, and said, "Connor, I'm your mother." And I responded, "No, Vanessa is my mother. You're the woman who gave birth to me, nothing more." I said it like that, without yelling, without emotion, just a fact. Jeremy tried to intervene, saying something about how they were going through a very difficult time and that this wasn't the moment for this, and I just walked away. I had nothing to say to them, not then, and not ever. I thought that was the end of all contact with them, but I was wrong. Like 2 months after the funeral, right before Christmas, I was at midnight mass with my parents, my grandparents, and some cousins. It's a tradition we have. We always go to midnight mass on Christmas Eve, and then we go back home to open presents. We were sitting there. The church was full of people. Lots of candles lit, the choir singing carols, the whole thing. And suddenly I feel someone sit right behind me, and I hear Jeremy's voice saying, "Connor, we need to talk to you." I turn around and there they were, Jeremy and Stephanie, in the row behind, looking at me like they expected me to jump with excitement from seeing them. Can you believe it? They ambushed me at church, at Christmas, surrounded by all my family. Vanessa immediately got tense next to me, and Vincent leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Do you want us to leave?" But I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of ruining my Christmas, so I simply turned toward the front and completely ignored them. During the whole mass, which lasted like an hour and a half, Jeremy and Stephanie tried to get my attention, touching my shoulder, telling me they needed to talk to me, that enough time had passed, that they wanted to be part of my life again. And I, every time they spoke to me, simply looked at them with the most confused expression I could make and said, "Sorry, do I know you?" Like they were complete strangers who were bothering me at Mass. When the ceremony ended, I got up quickly and got out of there with my parents. Jeremy tried to follow us to the parking lot, yelling my name, saying, "Connor, please, just listen to us for 5 minutes. We lost our daughter and we don't want to lose you too." And that's when I stopped and turned around. I told him, "Jeremy, you lost me 14 years ago when you left me at my grandparents' house and never came back for me. Now you can't appear out of nowhere because your other daughter died and you suddenly remembered you had a son. It doesn't work like that. You can't discard people when they're inconvenient and then pick them up when you need them." And I got in the car and we left. I thought after that they would understand, that they would get the message that I didn't want anything to do with them. But no, they kept trying. I started receiving letters, not emails or text messages, but old traditional physical letters, sent to my parents' house because somehow they got that address. The first 4 or 5 I didn't even open. I just threw them in the trash. But Vanessa convinced me to read at least one. She told me that maybe they needed to close the circle or something like that. That maybe it was important for them, and that I could decide what to do after reading what they had to say. So one night, alone in my room, I opened one of the letters. It was from Stephanie, handwritten, like 6 full pages. She talked about how she regretted everything, how every day since she left me with my grandparents had been torture, how she had thought she was doing the right thing by giving all her attention to Zoe, but now realized she had completely failed me. She said she loved me, that she had always loved me, that not a day went by that she didn't think about me. She talked about specific moments from my childhood, things I didn't even remember, like the time I fell off a swing and broke my arm, and she stayed up all night at the hospital with me, or when I learned to read, and she sat with me every night for months to practice. She was trying to show me that she had been a good mother at some point, that not everything had been bad. And look, reading that letter affected me more than I want to admit. Part of me, the part that was still that 6-year-old boy who wanted his parents to love him, felt something. But the rational part, the adult part, knew that pretty words on paper didn't change what they had done, didn't erase 14 years of absence and abandonment. So I decided to respond to them, not because I wanted to forgive them or have a relationship with them, but because I needed to tell them exactly how I felt, without filters, without worrying about their feelings. I wrote them a 3-page letter. I told, to them I understood that Zoe had been sick, that I understood they had been under immense pressure, but that their decision to simply get rid of me had been selfish and cruel. I told them I was lucky that Vincent and Vanessa loved me, because if it hadn't been for them, I don't know what would have become of me. Maybe I would have ended up in the foster care system or something like that. I told them their apologies were like 14 years late, that they couldn't simply appear now that Zoe had died and expect me to fill that void in their lives. I told them I had had a good life in spite of them, not thanks to them, and that if they wanted any relationship with me in the future, it was going to have to be on my terms. When I was ready, if I was ever ready. I sent that letter like a year ago, more or less. I received a short response from Jeremy saying he understood that he was going to respect my space, that when I was ready to talk, they would be there. Since then, there's been silence, which is honestly a relief. Sometimes I think about them. I wonder how they are. if they're okay financially, if they got over Zoe's death. Part of me feels bad for them because they did lose a daughter and that's horrible for anyone. But another part of me is angry because they had a living son who needed love and attention during all those years and they simply ignored him. Today I'm 26. I graduated from college 2 years ago. I got a decent job in digital marketing for a tech company. I have my own apartment, an incredible girlfriend who knows this whole story and supports me, and a solid relationship with my real parents, Vincent and Vanessa. I see them every 2 weeks for dinner. I spend all the holidays with them. I call my mom like 3 times a week just to tell her random things about my day. My grandmother, Mabel, is still an important part of my life. She's 82 years old now, and still makes those chocolate chip pancakes she used to make for me when I was a kid. My grandfather, Stanley, died 2 years ago, which was very hard for everyone, but we were there together as a family to support my grandmother. Am I going to forgive Jeremy and Stephanie someday? I don't know, honestly. I don't feel like I owe them forgiveness just because they feel guilty now. Maybe in the future, when I'm older, when I've processed everything completely with therapy or whatever, maybe then I can have some kind of superficial relationship with them, like seeing each other at Christmas or something like that. But for now, I'm fine where I am, with the people who chose me when no one else did, with the family I built, not by blood, but by love and real commitment. And I guess that's enough for me.